Hello, Jason. This is Bunny Kingdom. Welcome to my kingdom of rabbits. It's pretty fucking cute, right? Yeah, I know. I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. So, after a little hiatus of yesterday, which did not work to stream, I am back and better than ever for today, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to play Bunny Kingdom. Oh, there is. You get a total of, I want to say, like 35 bunnies to start your game with. So, during setup, depending on how many players you're playing, you're going to choose from the colors available. So it plays up to 4 players, and this game is made by Richard Garfield, who is the designer behind Magic the Gathering. So yeah, when you're setting up the game, you're going to choose whether you're playing a 2, 3, or 4 player game, and you'll pick your color. So you start with however many bunnies are in this bag. I could look in the rule book, but I'm pretty sure it's about 35. So lots of rabbity love going around. I usually take the light pink because it's my go-to color, but you're free to pick whatever color you want. And then down here on the bottom of the board, we actually have it covered here by the stack of, this giant stack of cards. It tells you each round how many cards you're going to be drafting. So it is a drafting game, and you're playing 3 different phases each round. So if you're playing a 2 or 4 player game, you're each going to be drafting 10 cards per round. If you're playing a 3 player game, you're going to be drafting 12 cards per round. And you play a total of 4 rounds in the game, and then after that, it is done. So I'm going to go through and I'll explain to you a bit about the different phases and sort of the objective of the game. So the board is laid out in a grid, as you can see. On each side, there's A through J, and then on the top, there's 1 through 10. So when you're drafting cards to occupy a space, they're going to have, oh my goodness, did I grab it? Oh, here we go. So as an example, this one here says F10. So kind of like Battleship, you're going to then place your rabbit on that spot. So you just locate it on the board, and you find F and then 10. So that's how you locate those spots. So it's basically just a grid. There are different types of cards in the game. So phase 1 is the... Can't see me, right? No. Phase 1 is the exploration phase. So that's the start of the game. In the exploration phase, you're going to draft cards and then play cards. So in the game, once you've picked up either your 10 or 12 cards drafting for that round, you're going to look at your hand and determine which cards you want to play. Based on your strategy, so based on your strategy in the game, it's going to depend which cards you want to draft. Obviously, you're going to want to draft cards next to each other because the point is to build up a strong fief, I think, which is your sort of bunny kingdom. So the way that works is you're going to generate points based on the strength as well as the resources you're producing. Now, each of these sections on the board will produce a different resource. There are 4 different resources, or 3 different resources, sorry, on the board, and then there are some rare resources. So they're pretty clear. Up here you have these wooded areas that produce wood. And you can find them sort of along the board everywhere here. Then you also have these farm spots that produce carrots. And then lastly, you have the water spots that produce fish. So that is the resource that you're producing if you have a bunny on that spot. The way that you generate points in the game are by building these buildings. So you can see they're little bunny buildings with little carrot turrets. So they come in size 1 or power 1, power 2, and power 3. So the way that you generate points is based on the amount of turrets, so power of your fife, so the little caret turrets, multiplied by the amount of unique resources that you're producing in your fife. So if I have a 2 building here, and I've got a little bunny here, and I've managed to draft here as well as here, I now produce only one single resource, which is carrots, multiplied by 2 because I have a building here with 2 turrets. So that would generate 2 points for me. Now, if I occupied another carrot space, like here, it would not generate 4 points for me because it only views unique resources. So you really have to diversify, and you have to expand your fife to occupy different types of resource spaces on the board. So again, when you're choosing your cards, when you're drafting in the first round of the game or during the exploration phase, you want to make sure that you're, again, diversifying in your resources, potentially claiming some of these blank resources so that you can build rare resources on them, and I'll explain that in a second. Or occupying more city spaces so that you can have more buildings with these little carrot turrets on it, or towers, whatever you want to call them. So that's sort of how you're going to get points throughout the game. So again, the number of unique resources multiplied by the power of your fife. So the power is, again, the little carrots on the buildings. So when you're looking through your hand, you're going to want to draft some cards that will connect to existing fifes that you have, or potentially there are other cards in here. Again, I'll show you this in a second. There are cards that can contribute to your endgame scoring. So you might want to draft those as well. On your first draft of the game, you're probably not going to have much of an idea of what's happening. Not to mention, you're going to draft 2 cards and then pass them along, so your neighbor is going to end up with that hand that you might not get those cards back. So you do your best to draft, as close as you can. So I'll go through the different card types. So we had gone through the sort of blank space type. So this one is F10. So if you look on that space, it's actually just a green empty space on the board. Let's see if I can get that to focus a little bit. There we go. Compared to this one here, where we have a 6, but you see how at the top it has a fish resource? So what that means is that that card will generate or occupy a space that produces fish. So when you're drafting, it makes it a little bit easier too, because you don't have to search on the board exactly where those spots are, but you do want to kind of look around to make sure it is somewhere attached to where your fife is. Now, the other types of cards there are scroll cards. So scroll cards will either give you they're for endgame scoring. So you place those face down after you draft them. So I've pulled 2 out here. So one of them, the Royal Scepter, will give you just an immediate bonus here. So you can see the Royal Scepter gives you 3 points. I'm not sure why this isn't focusing. There we go. 3 points. And then we have a card here like the Bureaucrat. So the Bureaucrat will give you endgame scoring. So you're going to gain 1 victory point for each parchment you have, including this one. So that might be an objective for you. If you get this one early on, the Bureaucrat early on, you might want to draft more parchment cards. Okay, so we went over that. Now there are the rare resource cards. So there's a few different types. There are pearls. As an example, this is a pearl, and as you can see next to it, it has a water symbol. So that means specifically that you can only play that card on a water spot. Alternatively, there's also things like a mushroom card that, as you can see here, you can only place on a forest spot. So each of these different rare resources are going to have a unique spot on the board where they can be played. And what you do when you draft those is you take a corresponding token with the rare resource at hand, and then you would place it during your build phase on one of those spots. Again, I'll go through the phases in a minute. I'm just going through the cards. And then you also have building cards. So they come in a couple different forms and they have different powers on them. Now, this one here, there's a 3. There's also 2 and a 1, and then you also have a location card that has a city on it, or that is a city. So that's what you see, these cities on the board. Now, the 3 turrets, so these are actually how you get your buildings. So this one would come with this 3-size tower, but as you can see, it can only be played on a mountainous range. So before you are able to build this 3-powered castle, you would have to have a mountain range somewhere that you could play it on. But if you don't, you would just take it, you would take it aside and then you would put it on the card and then keep it for one of your future build phases, and then a bunny would accompany it. Well, there would already be a bunny on that spot anyways from you owning that spot to begin with. Now, the other 2 types of cards that I'm going to show you, or 3 types of cards I'm going to show you, there are sky towers. So sky towers sort of let you circumvent having to have your fiefs next to each other. So you would attach one of these sky tower tokens in the appropriate color, and that would make any 2 of your non-adjacent fiefs count as if they were one fief. So that can be very powerful, especially if you're trying to connect different resources that aren't close to each other. So if you've got, 2 or 3 resources in this area and 2 or 3 in this one, and you've got a lot of buildings, well, by attaching them, you'll get quite a large multiplier. So the other 2 types of cards I have to show you are provisions. So provision isn't a scroll card, but it's an immediate effect card. So when you draft this card, it says to immediately draw and play 2 cards. So that can be helpful to expand a little bit more. However, you don't know what you're drawing. So it could put you somewhere where you absolutely don't need to be or even want to be. Lastly, there are camp cards. The camp cards are beneficial. They're kind of like a temporary placeholder that allows you to occupy one of the spaces on the board without actually having ownership of it. So this can be good in a way that it can attach, maybe a couple of your bunny fiefs that have just a space in between and you haven't been able to draft that card. But the downside to it is if you build that during one of the earlier rounds in the game, if somebody else drafts that actual card of that location, you're going to lose that ability. So most of the time people will keep these for the end of the game so that they can use them as last minute spot occupying places so that they can attach their fiefs or just make it larger. So you can also see on these cards that one says Camp 3 and the other one says Camp 5. I'm sorry guys, my camera is not wanting to focus for me today. So the lower number you have, you're going to be placing your camp first. So in this case, between Camp 3 and Camp 5, Camp 3 is going to be placing their card before Camp 5. So the lower number you draft, the better, because at the very end, there's typically only a couple spots left on the board. And you really want to be able to get into the spot before someone else, because you can definitely use your camp just to block somebody else from getting in and enlarging their fief. All right, so I'm going to go through the rounds of the game. I just wanted to explain those cards and sort of the whole objective of the game so that you can understand what you're doing. So in a round, you would, again, if you're playing 2 or 4, you're going to take 10 cards per player. If you're in a 3-player game, you're going to take 12. And the first phase of the game is the exploration phase. So this is the drafting phase of the game. So each player simultaneously chooses 2 cards. So I've gone ahead and chosen or set up a, like a mock hand here. And I have a whole bunch of different things. I do have a C8 and a C7. So if we look on the board here, we have C7 and we have C8, and they're right next to each other. So I might want to draft those 2 cards. So after everybody's chosen their 2 cards, you're going to pass your stack to the next player, and you're going to occupy those 2 spaces. So I'm going to occupy C7, which matches that one, and C8. Now keep these in your own personal discard pile because sometimes people will misread these cards, and it's an easy way to go back and refer to who has the appropriate space. There's one thing also that I did not mention, but that is important. On the board here, you're going to see some of these spots on the mountainous ranges have lava in between. So those actually cut off your fife. So if I have a bunny, as an example, here and here, there's lava in between. This is 2 separate fifes, so 2 separate bunny gatherings, which means that they would not count together for counting points. They would count as 2 separate ones. So when choosing your placement on here, make sure that you can either connect around it or make sure that you're on the right side of the lava. It's one thing that people often do, and it's an easy way to screw yourself over. So that's what you would do. So we draft the 2 cards, play it. I get my next set of cards. 2, 4, 6, 8. And then I look at my new set of cards. So again, this is the drafting round, super easy. I might want to take, well, here's a carpenter, so 1 point for each wood you produce. Or I could look at some of my other numbers. I also know that I have to build some of these towers to be able to start generating victory points. So this one here, for instance, is a 2 power. So if I take this one, it'll come with a 2 tower or a 2 turret or 2 tower building. And then I have an opportunity to build that during the following phase. So I could keep that with me for right now if I wanted to draft that as one of my cards, and then I could select something else. Let's say that I do want to take the parchment. Now, parchments are played face down, and they're kept until the end of the game. So people can see when you're collecting a lot of parchments. They might not want to pass you certain parchments, or they might want to draft them away from you. Now you can also see on the board where people are starting to build up a presence too, and you might want to just draft something to cut them off. So let's say I took one of the parchments and this building. And then again, this goes around and I get my other stack of cards back. So you're going to do this until your hand is empty, and that will end the exploration phase. So then you move on to the construction phase, and this is where you can build any of these tokens that you've gotten through cards. So again, any of those rare items or rare resources you can build. The airships you can also build during the construction phase. And lastly, this is also where you're going to be building these cities right here. So the tower has no restriction on where it needs to, or where it can be built. So you can build it effectively on any space. The only stipulation when it comes to building is that you can only have one single token per space. So if I've gone ahead and built one of these rare resources, I can't put a building there. So you'd never be able to put a building and a rare resource like that. Nor could you put two rare resources on the same space with a bunny in between. So again, it's only ever one piece per grid space on the board. So I would go ahead and choose to build my bunny fife like that during the construction phase. So I've built a 2-tower building. And that's the construction phase. As well, if anybody has played any of those camps that I mentioned, you could take the opportunity to place those. But like I said, the danger of doing that early is that somebody else, if they draft one of those spaces in the following rounds, you'll lose that token. So it's not usually worth it right away because, as I said, there's very few spaces left at the end of the game. So chances are you will lose that token throughout the game. But if you wanted to build to connect it to generate a lot of points, I mean, that's totally worth it. But sometimes early on, you don't have a big enough presence on the board to really make it worth it. Now we move into the harvest phase. So harvesting is where we're going to count our victory points. And I have these little bunnies set up here. I usually put one of each color on the 0 spot and one of each color on the 100 spot because most players will go above 100 points throughout the game. Or at least some of them will. 200, I don't think I've ever seen anybody get above 200 points in the game. So how we calculate victory points during the harvest phase, again, if you remember, it's the power of your cities or the power of your fief. So in this case, I have 2 carrots on my building here. And I'm going to multiply it by the amount of unique resources that I'm producing. So I'm producing a carrot resource here, and I have 2 power for this fief. That would generate 2 victory points for me. So I would move my guy to the 2 victory point spot. Now, of course, after drafting tons of cards, you're going to have a presence sort of everywhere, or hopefully you'll have a presence on a bunch of places on the board. So you're going to count up the victory points for each of your fiefs. So each individual bunny grouping, you're going to count your victory points for. Now in this case here, so let's say I had this fief, I have a carrot, and I have a wood that I'm producing, and I have a building with only 1 power, so 1 turret. That would produce 2 resources times the amount of turrets, so 2 times 1, I would get an additional 2 victory points. Now, you can see how that can grow exponentially if I had, let's say I had a 3 turret here, and I was producing also fish. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turrets because I have a 2 power and I have a 3 power. And then I'm producing 2 different types of resources. So I'm producing fish over here and I'm producing carrots here. So we would do 2 resources times the power, which is 5. That would get me 10 points. So I'd go from 4 to 14. So the importance of having these buildings is very high. So most people will draft buildings when they get them. And then, as you can see, you might have a large presence too. Let's say I had something like this. But, so I have a fief here of 5 rabbits. I do have 2 unique resources, but I have no buildings. So I'm not producing any victory points for that fief. Because otherwise it would, because I do have 2 unique resources, but I have no building. So it's very important to get buildings in your fiefs or you're never going to produce resources. So that's the 3rd phase of the game, which was the harvest phase. And then you are going to go back to the exploration phase. So this is when you go back and we're going to do drafting again. So you grab your stack of either 10 or 12 cards based on how many players you're playing. And you're each going to draft 2 cards per round, either placing bunnies or if they're parchments, you're going to keep them in your stack off to the side. And you'll go through and do that 4 rounds. At the end of the 4th round, the board is going to be basically full. And you're going to do your final scoring, and then you're going to score each of your parchments. So if they produce, so this one, for instance, is a carpenter, and the carpenter says produce 1 victory point for each wood I produce. Now, in this case, I'm only producing 1 on the board, so that card would only effectively be worth 1 victory point. So if you did draft that, you want to make sure that you're focusing and drafting cards that produce wood. Now, as well as I have the diplomat, so 1 victory point for each territory on the edge of the board that you control. I don't control any. But again, if you're going to draft that card early on, then you're going to want to focus on controlling or drafting all these spots along the edge of the board, because as you could see, it could generate a lot of victory points for you if you focused on doing it that way. And as well as the regular just point cards, like the Royal Scepter that I showed you earlier. So that one, the Royal Scepter, has just a straight up 3 victory points. It has 3 little carrots here, or it has 3 carrots. So that one will net you just straight up 3 victory points. And then you'll add up your total score, and whoever has the most victory points wins. So